Welcome you viewers to Energies of the Day number 70. Alexander, I'm glad you're here. Thank you for the donations, and I shortly please you to donate. We need it. So let's start with the energies. We've got many headlines. What qualities are there at the moment? Big intensity. That's a great subject. We experience many things that are so fundamentally intensive that it's not before. Maybe this subject war, for example, it's for many people a subject that not totally can be excluded. 10 years ago, many people couldn't imagine how fast such a situation would develop. That's an example what's also valid for other parts. In financial area, the euro is so low. I've got a message about that, where that's said. 2 years ago, people wouldn't have thought that way. Now the elephant stands in the room. And for me, it's the big quality now, the 70th day's energy. The strong intensity we can see now, it's unoverseeable in the room. And at the same time, the strong tension, and that we are, on the one hand, the wish to exit from all those areas, aspects. On the other hand, this strong being included that you can barely escape. That's something that puts us into a big field of tension, and these are challenging times. This is how I would summarize it. Is it so that maybe 20, 30, 50 years ago so many people have not questioned the way we live? In those days people thought, I have a job, I can send children to school, I can make good grades, I have a good life, I have a house, I can be confident. Or has it been always this way? Or is this now the special time quality? People realize that what we thought we would create a life where we could live comfortably, this would not go anymore? Yes. Here it's very much about from which perspective you look at it and which time frame. What we see the last years, for example, your childhood, my childhood, the changes in our own lives, that's only a very small part from the whole developing process, but it's interesting. Not because our individual stories connected to that, but also this time, this incredible acceleration gets visible. In times before, there were also dramatic changes in front of all eyes, but not so obviously seen by and interpreted by as many people as now. And many people didn't care what the people up there did. And now, as we see the elephants in the room, we're confronted. We perceive we lose our rights always more. And we feel that the door of the cell gets closed, in which we have been pushed for centuries long. In this moment, we can see in the last second, things are very obvious, and the awakening comes at this time. So the systemical questions are put more obvious, are asked more obvious. So a long time ago we said politics of this party is not so well, but that you basically question the whole system, the whole political system, how money is created. Those times they said, the banks, well, but they didn't really understand that they create money from nothing and make us dependent. Meanwhile, many know it, and that's the game. It's a game changer now for the powers that centuries or millennia long with their knowledge about the human psychic, mental, knew that the plans about wars, wanted to achieve certain aims. This has worked and now it doesn't work anymore. Yeah, there are two things, two possibilities to see this. On the one hand, we live in a time where control gets much more possible. We have technical possibilities for control, powerful instruments to locate a human within seconds via a smartphone or a chip or a satellite, and to see what he's doing right now. It has been a utopia many decades ago. Now it's one way of many ways. And the technical influences of control are much bigger now. This one area, there's more control, but at the same time we realize that our mistrust starts to grow, and our knowledge within the shortest time so unbelievably can change in this time that we start to perceive many things to get to the status, many backgrounds. So many things have been prepared covertly with much and now there comes a time where we say the door's almost closed and we're not far from this. Let's think about, Joe, how it would be without cash money, how you, at the push of a button, could be cut off the supplies of the systems, your rent, electricity. Maybe your house has this new electric counter that can be switched off via remote control. You cannot pay something to eat. This is not so far away right now in this time. We addressed it already. In Sweden there are banks which without cash money. But it's not that they have done this step for total overtake of this, so there has to be steps. They have to somehow logically explain it, and we see that logic gets away in many things. Yeah, we have an imbalance of the powerfuls towards those they want to control. Along the number of the people, that it would be easy to sweep those dominating people away within minutes, within hours. The system would collapse if the people who are used as slaves would get how the powers are organized. So we need a model. Former times the king had God-given power, and now you can become king. This is a model that in practical implementation has led us here. Now we get into commercialization of the system that brings yourself into a pseudo responsibility where you are guilty yourself or responsible yourself, so you can address only yourself. You're thrown back into thinking patterns that keep you in such thinking patterns, but now we are getting ripe. This ripening process is unstoppable. It happens now, and it cannot prevent it through all this technology. This is the state in which the polar powers have friction. where the touching point is. This is the most interesting aspect because there the healing at the same time expresses itself. So we experience incredibly interesting and tensionous times. This is a big subject. So at the end of the show we will address this, how we can deal with it. Everyone may experience different symptoms, physical symptoms, or doesn't feel well. We all know it. And we want to give some clues for that. I found a great text. The Matrix program collapses by Zen Gardner. It happens. It's an old, obsolete programming, and the engineers of DC cannot keep up. You know it. If your computer software is not actual, technology can keep up. It's the same thing. The repetitors of creation, they cannot keep the operational system up, and it makes them crazy. Look at the desperation we are experiencing now. The brutal military and this one aspect. And now we see great lies that get always more transparent and incredible for almost everyone. We admit there are the apathic ones who swallow everything, but we see a core meltdown in front of our eyes. If you can see it, look there. That's a summary of what's happening now. I want to add that what happens because now is the time for that. Not because we chose so, but it happens unstoppably in us. And that's very, calming. It's not decisive if I do the right thing, if I go to that demonstration, do I this, do I that. It happens in you. Please just admit what's happening right now in you, express it with courage that gets into motion right now, and don't let yourself get suppressed. It happens as it should happen, and it happens anyway, but this way it happens in a nice flowing together of what gets into motion in you and what you can perceive as true as an observer. Something gets into a flow that is needed now, and we can let ourselves go in that. Maybe we have fear in many places, but since the process of the change is so enormous, not only in the outside, also in us, we experience great changes. We've often criticized if you say we should do nothing. This isn't what you say. There's the question where the free will comes up. We always talked about that we become conscious creators now. As conscious creators, we have no free will, or do we have as conscious creators the possibility to do something? Let's look what is ours, not what do others expect of us. To live our own self-expression, so to say. So if you have want to have a true answer, or near the truth, then in this illusion you perceive you are as little creator as you have been before, because you are not here. You're only the divine quality. Everything beyond that begins in a illusory quality, and it's not really true. But this is a level where we cannot do anything as humans. So we know it, but we can only perceive it as soon it's shows on an illusory level. We can see life can just be seen by us if it takes on a form, if it grows as grass, or the animal comes out of the egg. But the life had been there before, but it starts to show up now. It's in us. We, in reality, are life. And the creations of life with which we are identifying, they are as little real every single development that happens. But it's an illusion that has a great importance for us because it's the only way for us to perceive ourselves. We perceive ourselves by forgetting and remembering again. And it's a question, it's not, we don't need, it's just a question that shows how strong our perception is based by identifications, by conditionings, by creations of patterns. This is an important process through which we go now. So if we become true creators now, then we get that all that's created happens through us. Also our divinity. Then we are one with this creation, we are creator, we are the created ones, and we are everything that is in full consciousness. They can say, yeah, this is what happens. So, just as you like, from which perspective you ever might view it, this misunderstanding is inevitable, because there are two aspects. A little bit, Joe, as if we would argue if the picture that we watch would show two opposing faces or a vase. You know these pictures in black-white. You could see this is, one says it's two faces, one says it's a vase. We both are right. And here the recognition of being conscious that both pictures are there at the same time. But this is, we can often not perceive. And this happens through an inner way of perception, that we can perceive the world newly. And the world is not to be changed. We can see it as it is, can be in peace with this, but cannot understand it before, as when we are moving in our polar views. So, we move the world, and the world arises through you. You are the creator of the world. And so far the world does change, also through me and through you. But when we see we don't have to do something special or to fight something special or being more conscious, consciousness is rising, and the things that tried to keep us in this materialistic world, they don't work as before. So many things change quickly. I would add, for the understanding, two things. One is this what happens now is perceived differently by us now. Things that happen are reflected differently. We experience what happens differently. We experience ourselves differently. It's another approach in which we experience the world now. This didn't happen through a decision of reason to say, from now on I want to see the world in a different way. This happens through impulses. And sometimes it comes to this process in which I can devote myself to this new approach and open the doors. This doesn't happen through a decision of reason. It happens in the moment in which the moment must happen in you. That development, evolution we could call it, transformation can take place. So the note, the clue, if you say you cannot do anything, it doesn't mean you should not do anything, but it happens through you that you do things. If you would stay in bed, you maybe lay some years in bed, but at some point this would be too long, but the lying in bed would be the thing you would do, not because you thought it would lead to a result, but that this happens because it happens through you. And if you see it again, you can see that all is in a correlation, and everything did work different than we in our plans would have thought it would have happened. This leads us to a desperation if they explain us again and again that those failed plans would have been a failure as a human being, or a failure in life. Many people say, "Oh, why didn't I succeed in this? Didn't earn that much money? Didn't have that car, that partner." This brings us to unpeace
with our lives. And this is needed to keep us in control. So we are entrapped in certain slopes in life. These slopes stop now, they stop their influence, and the things which are really meaningful get free. You could say the relevant, the being. This is the being of you. This knocks at the door and says, the coping with yourself and this stops. As the true being appears, illusion stops. Illusion cannot persist in the face of the true. So when the truth appears, the lie disappears. The truth is so much feared because it's present at once. It's understandable. This may not happen. This must not happen in the nebulous times of joking. Let's start with the messages. We see in the messages, in the news, the illusions. I've got a message here. It's so nice, in addition to what he said. People believe less. There were questions. Survey. 60% of the people don't believe in democracy anymore in the Federal Republic of Germany. So surveys have to be looked at skeptically. But it's a totally different result than that which Angie and the lucky Gauck president normally the media talk about them. Yeah, it's different. Maybe you want to read it? German economical news. U.S. Senator McCain, no matter who shot Nemtsov, Putin is guilty. That's a clear statement. I've got something interesting from the Sun magazine. Nemtsov murdered, Putin did it. There's no question. Was it him? No, just a statement. He was it. Fits to that perfectly. It's basically a different form to spread the same story. Putin is guilty is an interesting formulating. So the subject of guilt has a great meaning. So it's U.S. Senator John McCain has in a statement blamed the Russian government for the murder of Boris Nemtsov. But this stays vague. So McCain, the most prominent opponent of Putin, wants to gain politically from this. So we can obviously see that there's something that happens. You could see there's oil spilled into the fire of the conflict, as it is called, with Russia and the Ukraine. We can see that certain protagonists, just for this function, seem to be like created. The type, simple types of figures like cliches you can perceive. They embody a certain type or a certain group of, you would have to know, a stupid population that is stuck in these patterns. And those want to be should be addressed, no one else. This is everywhere, and we have in certain directions what we talked about. They expressed here. You see that the people that don't think that much, they have these pictures. Putin did it. You see Putin with the picture, so it's clear. It's maybe enough for some people. He has an older son, like Putin's missile, where he shot this plane, MH17. It was clear that's from him. Please show the picture again. There you even see the long arm of the weapon, so it's not evil only, but an attempt of a lie, which is, I put it in the head and
Ja, das ist ja erschütternd und so funktioniert es leider viel mehr, als sich das der Einzelne vorstellen kann.
This happens much more than the single individual can imagine, because many things are not worked out, but it reaches the reason in areas that are and feeds it with pseudo memories that later in another context can be totally misinterpreted. But on the other hand, people wake up and look closely. Here are two pictures. They show that the lie press continues as before. Here it's in the heute.de. In Kiev there's 50 Russian tanks, but it's from 2009 from Georgia. Same picture reused to prove that Russian tanks have been in Ukraine. So the lie press is a term that's real. So if they complain about this term, but you must show it to them. So here they point to that if the truth stands in the room, the lie cannot persist. The lie press and the subject term lie press gets to the point. It's not the bad word, but it must be the word of the year, and it will be the word of the year 2015. So it gets always more conscious, more obvious. If you show Georgia with a picture of the tank, it was a similar construction those times with Saakashvili, where you could, that was steered in the background, and we see this story repeats, and that they use the same picture. It's just consequent. It works in many archive picture. It works in many places. So we could say we perceive more. There are some quick-witted people who see those pictures or recognize that those pictures are false, and they spread it through the internet, and the truth gets spread more than earlier. So here's a network that shows we're all connected. There's this wonderful picture for that we above little steps we're almost connected to everyone. So here's the attempt of the letter that an American scientist wanted to send to a faraway place in the USA. He said, I don't want to send it via mail. I send it to someone I personally know, who lives closer to the place than me, maybe still 1,000 miles away. But I write it to someone, this letter to someone who lives closer, and he should write this letter closer to someone who lives even more closer, and should do the same further. So in many thousand attempts, there were only an average 5 steps to achieve everyone in the world. So the last one stood in direct contact to someone. So here the last one should always know the addressed person. And in average, there were only 5 contacts necessary to achieve everyone in the world, in the last corner of the world. It was very symbolic. And he also found out something else. And the book behind this is Tipping Point. If you want to read it, in this book there are other interesting, reading-worthy points. And he found out in this attempts that there are always, again, people who were a very important station on the way. There were many letters got mailed via this person. There was someone in this chain who many people knew. He got hundreds of those letters, and he said those people have a special networking quality. They are multiplicators. There's something like a power changing station where power in some ways gets networked. It's very symbolic.
We live in this time where this quality of those people over the internet and technology now leads to that with great dynamics, many things spread faster. So Nemtsov, is there other information? Yes, of course. So Nemtsov, there's for example, yesterday the death news was published 3 days before his death. Yeah, this is what I also have seen. So that's, we should say some words about him as a person, about his history. Have you something? No, I have not wrote anything, but I could tell. Have you something? I've read something and printed out everything. You don't make it to print everything, but maybe he had certain interests and the opposition in Russia. They pretend as if the opposition in Russia was really dependent on him, or he's a leading figure. Sometimes figures are set into the country that have put into the country that should pursue certain goals. So I could turn to a later page. I got later news. This is the Conrad Foundation had political influence in a bad way. So this is no secret, but in the current subject Russia, Ukraine, Kiev, it's unoverseeable how strong the connections are. And it has to be said in obvious ways, and Obama admitted it. Obama has clearly said that certain powers, also through the USA, have brought those things into motion. Here also the point to the artificially manipulated deep oil price that hits Russia, amongst others. So these are no theories or assertments, they are provable, and the protagonists that seem to put the strings here, and the truth is are the ones they admitted it. And this is important to understand. This figure that has now appeared on stage with the dramatic death is a figure that up until now has seen the Western interests as the right ones. This is what you can read. He sees the view of the West as the right one. And from this would be a figure who would be worth protecting from the view of the West. But here we have to think on and see that also by sacrificing certain figures we can achieve something like a martyr effect. And he is put into the center very, very much. So we are, by effectiveness, we are shed over by effectiveness. It's the same effectiveness with Charlie Hebdo, or when certain figures are instrumentalized. And this we can really see as observers. So it's missing that Putin's passport would be found at the site. This can still come, but here I have a news where it gets obvious what we can perceive and why someone who doesn't know the backgrounds, political backgrounds, alone through the way how the press reacts can get an impression where it would lead, should lead. So NTV has the news, why did Nemtsov have to die? Putin has created a Terminator. The opponents accuse Putin of murdering Boris Nemtsov. So here, let's say opponents. They don't describe who it is. There are no sources mentioned, just opponents. And this assertment you can you can just state without someone contradicting you. If you would know an opponent, this could be your father, cleaning woman, or someone who declares himself to be an opponent. And this is used as a way like
it is put in the world as if it would be a fact, at least as if this movement would be present. So Putin would have created an atmosphere of hate in Russia and have made this attack possible by this. And so this article proceeds, and opponents of Putin are quoted, and the whole story, they want to sell it, it's warmed newly. So it's a great possibility to keep this subject current, to demand human rights, and at the same time to see what they intend to do as alternativeless, and to sell them as measures that have to be done this way. Putin created a Terminator. This is Putin Terminator? Wow. So what kind of a Terminator should come now? This news I brought with me, we see from a bigger perspective, more obvious, what it's obviously about. This news is incredible. The headline is important. It's from the 20th February from NTV, and it says, USA, Russia undermines the world order. So here we have something interesting, where they accuse Russia. They would undermine the world order. USA make Russia responsible with drastic words for Ukraine conflict. The modern global world order would be undermined. Yeah. World order, we have heard. We have this clear and obvious clue. At the same time, thousands people remember the victims in Maidan. USA criticized Russia for Ukraine. They would undermine the multilateral institutions and the world order. And they obviously clearly show it in the media, yeah, they say it. Undermines the international diplomatics and the multilateral institutions. The fundaments of our modern global order. And here said what's the global order, and this is the international diplomatics. Those are the big institutions like like NATO, as a military prolonged arm. These are big organizations that often, if you regard them, have very different than democratic structure. So it's in the world order, it's about ordering, putting order in the world according to a certain plan of certain people, and they are from the West maybe, and Russia and other countries don't take part, so undermines the world order. This is the accusation. You can read how they react. Financial war. USA wants to make Russian enterprises insolvent. So this is a clear intention. They are all, maybe if the Russians would say the same about America, this would be unthinkable, wouldn't it? So here I have to point to something very urgently, what you said. So it is a good note. Imagine it the other way around. Some power would threaten the USA and say, we want to attack your companies. So here I want to remember that the Secret Service, that's always sold to us as the protection of the president, has one task. This is supporting the economy of the USA. This is the official task of the Secret Service. So we could, without speculating, just see what's happening. So what you just addressed. So we have a picture. The British Foreign Minister Philip Hammond has learned from U.S. Minister John Kerry which measures U.S. plan next against Russia. Russia expects that the EU joins to put Russian economy into the knees. So obvious plans, but this doesn't mean they have to be fair and just and for us all. Maybe the other way around. Yeah, you could say it this way. You just read, I tend to give additional clue that shows in this picture. We see the British foreign minister, we see the American foreign minister, and if we exactly see this picture, we could see the two flags in the background. Maybe you could show it again. We see the both identical colors on the flags. We see the Union Jack, this flag that's composed of three flags, the Scottish, the Irish and the English, and on the other side the American with the same colors. This is no accident. We have one and the same language of interests, and see if the EU has to support that. So we see how hierarchical structures work within illusion of the protagonists that in reality don't have the power, but they represent a pseudo power, and we see who has it, and these are those two representatives. And the EU doesn't seem to want to follow. Yeah, it's a little bit bitchy. EU is a little bit bitchy, so you have to put it into order again. And they do it. And here's a news that from the World newspaper. This way, Berlin wants to stop Putin's propaganda offensive. So with massive propaganda, Russia wants to blame the West in the Ukraine conflict and to justify their own actions. So the Foreign Office arguments on 18 Russian theses. So maybe you show it shortly. So it's a very martial picture. Like this is the way Berlin wants to stop Putin's propaganda offensive. So here's an attack, you see, and this attack makes fear. You know, if you see it so obviously, then it's like a war formulation, not a diplomatic. Yeah, you just read it. Now, Foreign Office refutes 18 Russian theses. I want to look closely on this. Russia wants to blame the West and to justify their own actions. So here's something that's very viewed one-sided, in a typical way. We might remember the times when Russia really was the enemy number one in the 70s, 80s, when they would have presented us as propaganda that they conveyed the picture in the West, how plump, how it's in Russia. The own way, the press, they perceived it in the press in a different way. And now the press, in a primitive way, shows with massive propaganda, Russia wants to blame the West. So here the hidden dog barks loudly. So it's in the truth nothing else than an official answer of the government transported through the media with 18 lies that are suitable to prevent own thinking. So I wanted to enter here, but I have found something better. But who wants can look at those 18 theses. So we will link them. So I want to say, Joe, I remember when there's an offensive years ago where you would have to vote. So there were also 12 theses, and this time I, in my old show, I could refute every thesis and their absurdity. They were so transparent, and there's only cliches. And who starts to think freely, you cannot come with this stupidness, stupidification to him. Here it comes, they prepared it professionally, and this has been the first step only. Okay. I have here from the blog, from the propaganda show, this little article. Here's summarized in a good way. State propaganda, Foreign Office publishes argumentational helps. So here, the Foreign Office provides something as argumentation help for those who don't want to know further if they're confronted with the truth. This reminds me of something else. The argumentation helps for the citizens' offices. What you say when the Empire Germans come up, or the people ask questions, or what they have sent the order officers or the lawyers. Argumentational helps. What do you do if someone wants to demand his nationality, or demands national institutions on parts where we privatize everything right now? What do we do with those people? And there are argumentational helps for them. So in the same pattern, there are argumentational helps now in reference with the subject Krim, with the Ukraine subject, and these are argumentational helps. And there it's Maidan protests in 2013 were because of the decision of Ukraine government on the 21st of November 2013 to stop EU-Ukraine association treaty and so on and so on. But in truth, Ukraine always wanted to get close to the West, and now there are fascists in power, and what happens is what has happened is an election, and here is explained why it is annexation has to be written because certain steps must follow, and these are military steps. So here it's important for the mainstream mediums that the term of annexation gets into the heads and should not be questioned. And this reminds me, at the so-called reunification, that in a certain, they repeated this term several ways, so it got in the head of the people, and people didn't realize what happens to those two economical areas this time. So certain interpretations of story, of happenings, are made a fact with a pseudo-objectivity that claims to here now as a national part wants to pronounce law. And this shows how much they are with their back to the wall. So I've brought something about Russia with me. It's like a low-level attack. Shows other forms of propaganda. Before I read it again, yes, it's in this news. It's like it's about trends. If we look at this superficially. But in reality, the trends are just an expression of a behind-lying energetical, basically, movement. The trend is fed, it's driven by the powers, by the forces behind it. Where is the wind if it doesn't blow? And the same is here. It's always wind blowing, there's always energy there. And sometimes we can obviously see it. And we see the wind here, like it's where certain trends are leading, and where wind machines are built, and people try to fire certain trends. But it's always about not letting yourself being pulled down by this, but to realize something's happening, that the old patterns don't work anymore. they grip to the shabbiest methods to try to keep up the system somehow, but it doesn't work from front and behind. They can see it. It's like the failed relationship between two partners, where in the end phase, maybe the man chains the woman in the home and doesn't allow someone to leave the house because he wants to protect the family, but those are perversions, and here it's recognizable that the relationship at latest now would have been failed. So we have this very low-level propaganda. Putin's new Russian have a sad being. So people on Crimea experience like it's as how it is living in Russia, and this shows that it's not should not be. Western firms withdraw. Food is lacking. Prices go up. So the German reader should know what it's to be a Russian. I don't know if it's better in Ukraine. So the currency goes in the cellar again. So in here it's about the second part. Here's in Russia people are doing not well. So in Aldi supermarket there is chicken week, so you cannot complain. And there's no, people show you that here is no scarcity. And this is the point where there's the Bavarian singer Ringsquandel, and here's a song. He says, construction store, cheap garden huts, and still they're unsatisfied, the people. This is a situation that the powerful people questioning and with big surprise see that people cannot be quieted anymore. It is not enough to keep us distracted, so because we put questions, and the stupidification is presented in such a bad way. It's something that's the opposite of what happens here. Many people from Ukraine go to Russia. Many people from Ukraine, also military, flee to Russia. So it's here a story being told that's like a propaganda that's so primitive that we basically just can it's disgusting. Just don't buy this newspaper, the Welt, anymore. Or the Welt, the world. It means the artificial world, as we explained in the last show. Russia would have been at this point regarded by subject. So what happens there shows also how strong those powers are in motion in us, and how the big protagonists are positioning for anew in the world. So China plays a great role. There's states, China and Russia cooperate. So here's an obvious new set on the stage and theater in which you sit. You've got something about the vaccinations? Yeah, later. Just continue because I have... Or Ukraine, maybe it fits. EU tax money goes through go to food seed big companies in Ukraine. Yeah, the German Left Party asked how EU money would be spent for Ukraine. It showed interesting facts. So Ukraine is not in EU, but EU tax money goes there. Oligarchs misuse EU money for land grabbing. They get some land in fighting areas, maybe without rights, or should belong farmers there. So EU, they get Ukraine gets credits from EU, but international big companies like DuPont, Monsanto, farm genetically manipulated plants there. I want to summarize this. It's a strange news. With EU means money, or money of the bank consortium or constructions. With this money in Ukraine, it looks as if it's steered by the companies, but it's their prolonged arms by the powers behind. They buy everything that's interesting. They want to put through everything they want to push through, and the ideas behind that come from the same direction as in other situations, and these powers, we see it obviously. The son of the American vice president has now gotten a job in Ukraine and is the new ordering many things there. The normal suspicious people are active there again. And if they shout, "We have got nothing to do with this," they would have done it before. But today they say, "We do it." But this is correct, isn't it? And we are very more bold way confronted with this predator capitalism. That's to do with Monsanto, with firms. They don't say what's good for nature or people or what brings the most profit. We know Monsanto has poisonous things, and in India 10,000 they committed suicide because they were dependent. It's not good for the people what this New World Order plans here. And we see obviously that EU tax money for those things. It is no surprise. For this the EU is there. And that this happens in front of our eyes in this freshly occupied country so fast and so in front of all eyes, that's astonishing. That the EU is a consortium to push these things through, it's not surprising. But if we see how they so boldly in front of all eyes make it so obvious, that's what it's about. It's land grabbing. These are not those people who did it some 100 years ago. Those are the big companies, and they are steered not by the tax stockholders, we can see, but the powers behind that. With their different tools and structures, they part the world. But it doesn't go so well as they imagine. Maybe here's another news. Italy stays without genetic modified in Venetia, in northeast of the country. In July 2014, the field with genetic manipulated corn has been destroyed. To prevent that, and the farmer who had planted this should pay 25,000 euro fine before court. He protested, but still, he has to. Italy has keeps forbidding genetically modified seeds, and the farmer has to destroy the modified plants. Just to show, not all that is planned runs as sound as they would like it. No, not at all. So it's important in this part that we look at what we said at the beginning. The own plans, what you think about, they show that something is running later totally different than they planned it. So in all that we can watch, we say everything that was intended well maybe leads to something different, and at the same time certain intentions have led in practice to something really different. So on the one hand they wish
to control something in certain ways, and they start something bigger, like in the internet we can say that had been an instrument of the militaries and should control people, and now is an instrument that in many parts just enables us to informations get spread, like here in Conscious TV. So here, to conclude the subject, I've got another category summarized and pointed to this before. This here is the news from the focus, and if you read it, then you hear how obvious this, how speak here. Depropriation, inflation. Why the financial storm will break loose till 2015? Again, depropriation, forced measures, inflation. Why the financial crash? Not if, but it will break loose, and they explain why. So this is depropriation is not nice. So we just read it word by word. Depropriation, inflation, and forced taxes. They show three scenarios that are unthinkable for many people, so they regularly depropriate. Maybe an interesting information right now. In the region where I am now, there had been a decision of a mayor who now the inhabitants depropriated of a small settlement. They bought all their ready-made houses. They were exhibition houses, yeah, and they bought them afterwards, and it was in the rim of an industrial area, but the mayor now took the approval away of those houses, and there live old people, and they should move out now. Yeah, and renewed those houses, and the mayor now says it doesn't work anymore this way, so you are depropriated if you wouldn't leave the houses at once. And the last input, the last attempt to protect of the people, they failed, and now they lose their houses. So we see how for many people something can get into life in a dramatic way that's unimaginable. And depropriation is such a big, unexpected subject. Many things are approaching us, at least they try it. So what you just said, depropriation, inflation, why it should break loose in 2015, you see it's not a possibility, so here they clearly speak what will be, they say. And in this aspect I myself decided in April to offer a one-day seminar to the subject, in the sense of what can I do at all, where are values still, which possibilities do I have, because so many people right now are dealing with this. And it will be in near Stuttgart in April. I think it's the 12th April, so it will be in the calendar at Satchit Ananda, or you could say, do one thing, satchitananda.org/April 2015. I will link this. It will be one day, and it's about concrete, direct things, because the subject is now in the room. Big subject, what can you do? So here, this part as a news that's very obvious in focus, if you would not believe it. In 2015, the storm we see visualized with this woman, so this clear statement. So you have a news which is looks totally different. Look please, just the headline. EP top, state has too much money, where to go with the money? Brutto
GDP, where to go with the money. So we see 18 billion euro. The German state at 18 billion euro too much, and all institutions together made great, and this said the statistic offers even more impressive. The quote lies Maastricht quote lies plus 0.6%, and Financial Minister Schäuble says from now on he doesn't have to make any new debt. So it's bigger stupidization is even not imaginable. So if we look at the debt and the interest we have to pay and the real debt and see such a news, we see how strong on the one hand it's still a big contrast that we have just seen and now this news. So actually you don't have to be make worries. We have so much money, and this is so sad, so easy here. And at the end, where with the coal? Where with the money? We just don't know where to spend. It's ridiculous. And highways could be used for free, and where with the money? Super saving General Schäuble asked that minister. And in this children's world, we see childish headlines, children who are a little bit very naive. So if there's a so contradictory news, they shake their head. So the Greece deal, the headline, also interesting. This is a deal, so a business. A deal is like they deal something. They negotiate, negotiations, we don't encounter them by accident, even at the lawyer, but here in New Germany say deal, Greek deal. Schäuble drives a theme almost all dreams out. So he has a strong say here, but we say meanwhile it doesn't, it's not valid anymore and it's a farce. But a certain group of people still is presented, don't make yourself sorrows. So you could point to that this news here should be read by totally different people. That's also interesting. So newspaper serves several groups. So the intellectual is in peace because someone is here going to the opposition and calls things by name. Addresses what he really wants to say, but in reality it's the satisfaction of his anger, that he should be confident. But at the same time, this news goes to other ones who is uncritical, have to be kept on this level. Oh yes, Schäuble was wrong. This news is a total contradiction to this news. Focus in the spiral of being broke, the poorest regions in Germany. You find them in Brandenburg, but here in the north also. Poorer regions. We see the strong drifting away between what we say, where with the coal, where with the money, and here the poorest regions. And who has not done it, just go to the pedestrian zone in Hamburg maybe, and there look what's actually going on, how many people go to the dustbins and get money from this. Not only in the big towns, not only the empty bottles for refund. And if you see that refugees get houses here, apartments, and people ask if they should escape somewhere to get houses or apartments. So unemployed ones. So we should focus on the poor people. Maybe we have got still a cold season. Many people live outside in incredible conditions. or in apartments where you cannot pay electricity and heating, and you cannot imagine how they live. So the subject not paying your heating anymore or electricity anymore, this is an important note behind that. As if an electricity power puts the power off, they say it's a social service, because they say they protect themselves from not going deeper into debt. We protect the other ones from further debt and by not delivering them electricity anymore. So everything is put on the head and is spit us in the face. You addressed the subject. Vaccinate your children, that's the headline here. And my headline is very fast, so you could start with that. This is correction for that. Here's NTV page and what it's appeared. It's also the source, NTV. Little headline above is a question of solidarity. And the headline under that is vaccinate your children. Measles spread in Germany. There was a child died in Berlin. I didn't want to, I have no other news for that. And this, although there is a protection through vaccination, but vaccinations is no private thing. You should not decide for yourself, and they say you why. And this I want to read to you. You could put out some aspects. One I have to find. It's so weird. Nicely weird. Maybe you show your headline. The joy of vaccinators about the death of the child is wrong, because the 3 points that died from measles but didn't do, and Health Senator Chaya said that the child had another disease and could have died from this, and a child in our civilization never died from measles if it's nourished well enough, and it was vaccinated. And at the third point is it got the first vaccination MMR 5 months ago, and now so they lied about the death of the one boy. So if we regard the subject, we have different aspects that you could see. So on the one hand, there are the children's diseases. It was normal before. They have a very important function in the development of people. They are from a very important point, something that we see as a healing process in the whole developing process. So we go through a crisis that can lead to a healing. So children's diseases have an important function, and people before knew it in earlier times, that certain diseases express certain developments, and today the approach is that symptoms or diseases, they should want to press it away. It's critically seen because they would just delay or postpone those symptoms. And before, parents said that children develop very much through such diseases. And the second, the subject vaccination. The subject vaccination is also, in the perception of many people, something very different than it had been 10 years ago. And we realize that, meanwhile, quicksilver should not be explained. And it's mercury in the vaccinations. They don't get anymore why this has to be in there. If you go to the supermarket today, you find and many ready-made soups without flavor enhancer and so on, without preservatives things. And this is a new trend, hasn't been many years ago. Meanwhile, you almost everywhere find it. Why? Because more and more people, we don't say consumers, but people who are humans who want to see what is being sold to them. We see a basic change. And this is also with the subject of vaccination. So this is a propaganda campaign to persuade people to vaccinations. But here's a great news from Italy. Milan court sentenced government or someone to pay for a child who got ill. There had been many such cases that through vaccinations autism had been brought forward. And we see this is a subject, we see it since the swine flu that people don't want to vaccinate. This epidemics with what you don't hear anymore today. When at this time it hadn't worked either to vaccinate people in masses. And the Ebola subject disappeared. These diseases, they don't work in the way the powerful people want to put people into fear, to have vaccinations for profit or implant whatever, like chips or other things, or poison like mercury, where they're easier to control. People don't seem to swallow that so easy. And this plan with the diseases and the vaccination doesn't work as planned. I want to add my news to the subject of vaccination with notes to see autism is very interesting aspect that in many parts now appears more and more in our own perception. And also there, people are stigmatized, and often this is like a kind of label, used as a kind of label to put people into a certain group. So about diseases, real diseases or real symptoms or definitions that just even create a disease worked into certain groups. And if we want to create such new pictures, we need medicine and vaccinations. And also in the USA, it's like you do not get refund if you're damaged by vaccinations or get money if you are damaged by that. And people, if vaccinations are tested for a long time to test if they work, this is not done in the multiple cases, most cases. And in kindergarten, parents are told that if children are not vaccinated, if they are not vaccinated, they cannot join. So parents should ask the doctor if he signs, if he would be responsible for damages out of vaccination. And he won't do it. It's a difficult situation for parents who are forced now to vaccinate their children. There is no force to vaccinate, but the impression is arise that you have to defend yourself against that. It's very good you say that. This is a basic principle that we encounter in many parts. This means you have to give up a higher right to
be able to address a lower
Für diejenigen, die sich beispielsweise hier mit dem Thema BRD auseinandersetzen,
a lower claim. This is problematic. Also for people who don't want to have a passport of the government, corporate Germany.
dann würde er spätestens an dieser Stelle
And in this part, you see, it's a problem you cannot solve it so easily when it's about passports. And you would have to give up something, to give up some theoretical freedom on another part to establish a lower claim. It's like here with vaccinations. There is no force to be vaccinated, but you cannot do certain things anymore. So in this way they create facts without legal basis it's needed, and can direct things in this way. But this news here has it in it. And I want to say it seems obviously that it's a media campaign in a big style with the subject of vaccinations. It should be supported in a great way. And I have here some formulations I want to share with you and the viewers. This is for the one part, the following sentence. What's the motivation of those who are against vaccinations? Who shout against vaccinations, the kind of way in which they speak here. What's the motivation of those who question it? But here someone shouts against something. So vaccination critics state often that pharmaceutical industry would make fear for vaccination. Of course they earn, but wouldn't be the profit higher if they would let the diseases spread and then sell expensive medicine for a cure? No. The other way a shoe gets out of it. So critics advertise on their pages, on books and so on. So here the wood in front of the head is decorated as the torch. Yeah, it's so ill, so bad that you have to be perverted to not to realize the absurdity. So they say they help with their cheap vaccinations. But what do the opponents do? They really do the money. Yeah, make the money. They are billionaires. Yeah, the vaccinating opponents, they advertise with presentations, books, or certain so-called, well, they really want to make money with, and they fear and they hit profit. Yeah, so the way how they formulate it here in this article, now it really gets interesting. Missing vaccination protection is not something that falls back to their own child. Many people from health or age reasons cannot be vaccinated. They need that. There is a herd immunity, yeah, that the virus should be killed if enough people are immune against it. This is why the vaccinating decision is not only private, this is also a question of society solidarity. It's a question also in the monetary system. Here we see this society solidarity is a perverted solidarity, that in reality is nothing else but absurd form to sell us thought models for the truth that are so so much easy to be seen through and not to be tested for true. So there's many information. Vaccination, you just look at the facts and statistics in books that are sold expensive. Then we have the vaccination report with Hans Tolzin. It's very there's not polemized here statistics and talk to doctors. And this part is because the 70s show, I have a little surprise, a book as maybe advertise who wants to enter this matter. I have to admit something, I don't know if this book doesn't exist. It's published anymore, it's older. You might maybe show it. It's from Robert and Wilson about the dictionary of conspiracy theories. I've bought it long time ago. I had to look when it is from Eichborn Publishing Company, maybe 20 years old or older. This book is from the year 2000. It doesn't seem so old, but still 15 years. And I met Robert Anton Wilson once personally in Santa Fe, New Mexico. An interesting Native American Congress. And Wilson was someone who didn't really believe in conspiracy theories. You must see, he's very critical. He was a writer. He read for Playboy and other magazines and has published a row of books, the Illuminati trilogy. He started this book to write a novel, a fictitious novel. It's written in a strange way. I like it very much. It's a little bit matter of taste. He writes a little bit jumpy and in his own way, but it's a nice book, and he describes in this book also an idea of government behind that and powers behind that, and he didn't believe it at all. But while writing this book, he encountered so much and got so many clues that while writing the book, he said, "Oh, it cannot be in a different way." And in this book, he describes conspiracy theories and proven things. And I brought it with me because it's a book that's a little older book, from the feather of a man who has not believed things necessarily. And so things happen more often. Yeah, people want to prove something's wrong, and then while they research, they see that there's truth in it. Yeah, and this has fireproof. Yeah, some of it from another perspective perceives things that are normally against his imagination and his search. Then you can find more objectivity. In this book we see many things that we know better, meanwhile, than to be found here, but there are interesting clues here. Here's something about vaccination. I know about vaccination tests of government, he has reported. I searched two things. One, Flight 533 is a story that remembers us in our Malaysian Airlines subject. It's about 8th of December 1972. The United Airlines Flight 553 from Washington to Chicago crashed near Chicago. 2 people on the ground and 43 passengers died. Dorothy Hunt was one of the victims. The wife of Howard Hunt, a CIA agent, he was in Pig Bay affair, and is no accident, this is said here. So directly after the crash, 50 FBI agents were at the moment at the site,
And there were found, they paid Mrs. Hunt some money that she doesn't talk about certain works. Or Captain Whitehouse, the pilot, had cyanide in his blood. This means that through chemical reaction after the crash, the critics say it's absurd, and 33.9 microgram, it's like a poisoning. President Nixon gave two fellows of him positions in the research commission about that, and the flight writing machine was only found years later. And you see old subjects, but this is a little clue. Read a little bit like as a trip in the past and what had already happened, and you less wonder about what encounters you now. And here I've got a second thing. The gnomes of Zurich. You heard of them? No. The British Prime Minister once complained about the gnomes of Zurich. He said they would have more power than all governments in Europe. Most people thought he would mean the big banks, but he meant the Grande Loge Alpina, Freemasons society where bankers belong to in Switzerland, and many important Swiss people. The Grande Loge and the gnomes, they were interesting for Messel Paoli, who stated groups to the P2 Lodge in Italy and so on. So you can open many doors into the rabbit holes, many traps, many illusions. Something isn't true at all, but it's fun and sharpens the view. And it's a book you can maybe find Robert and Wilson conspiracy theories dictionary. I know it from a time where this variety we found in the internet, the uncovered things we didn't find in this time. When I started, it was not obvious. We saw singular papers, copied them from a book and passed them on in Photoshop. 10, 20 or 100 copies we made from a paper. It wasn't spread in the way as it's now. So today we've got a really different time quality. And this reminds me of a time where really all was not so spread. At this point it's very good, and the man didn't say he didn't believe it all, but the proofs are obvious. It's fun to read it. Just a hint I give it. And an audiobook you brought with you. I don't know it. You say something. Hallelujah from Joachim Farnau, The History of the USA. Joachim Farnau, I appreciate him. He has died meanwhile. He is an author who wrote many read-worthy things. The Old Rome, Old Greece, about Prussia, wonderful book, and over the Old Fritz. He knows the scene and he describes it so vivid that you can really imagine it, and it's a wonderful possibility to see history in a different way. He has read one book written one book, Hallelujah, The History of the USA. It's an audiobook or a normal printed book. I want to recommend it to everyone who is interested in the history of the USA and wants to understand more what has developed in the USA. And you see, this story begins with the discovery of the USA. As far as you can see it as a fixed date, it starts with the settlements, with specialties, how this form of government came into place, and ends with the start of the Second World War. And here it's a time that we normally here don't know much about here. And it's a big contradiction to the kind of history, how we get it conveyed in the form that's very explainable through our Americanization of our own histories. So there's no Abraham Lincoln as a freer from slavery, and here you can follow a totally different kind of history, and you can hear many things between the lines, what's important for the understanding. And I recommend everyone to this book, and it's a great way to enter the subject to get more understanding of what happens now, because it's not old or and not new. I mean, sorry, not new. This people sent to me, the Fulda newspaper, with a hint I brought for you, Joe. You asked what happens in terms of police in USA. Many people fear policemen are dismissed or get no money or less money. So here there less money for health insurance. And this I got via mail with 4-cent letter, stylish. Here this news. This is national mistrust against the police. The current interview with Andreas Grün, chief of police union. Where is the shoe pressing police? Blah blah blah. Now, yellow marked some lines. They want to not to raise their wages for 1 year and lower their health insurance. Make it more expensive. I mean, it's a national mistrust against police. That's also, yeah. So we see that the master and the policeman don't have such the sheepdog and the shepherd don't have such a big great relationship anymore. So the dog noticed he's like a sheep, and he got his wool off. So here it's about police. Again, another news. It's also about the police union. They say how the police statistics keeps crimes secret. It's from the Welt newspaper again. The young violent people get less every year, but really it's maybe 80 times higher than official criminologists suspect. So like raped girls or repetitive criminals out of the statistics. And policemen complain that they may not mention where the criminals come from. So we have got a total distorted impression of crime rate in the state. I would add that what we can see, the impression is they admit things voluntarily or not, because what they present us officially, if these are the unemployment numbers, or how rich the population is, or how much the population is in the consume rush, this does not match with reality if we view not only in the consume temples but look into other corners. I have here a news fits from the Express newspaper under the headline Intensive Criminal Hassan, 14 years old, the protocol of a abandoned chance. And with 12 years he was criminal, And the Tannbusch man, it's from the town part of Tannbusch, yeah, he should be re-socialized in southern France. They gave him to southern France 500,000 euros they invested in Hassan. Yeah, Côte d'Azur is not cheap, yeah. But the problem was Hassan there also was behaving bad, and so the measure had to be aborted. So now it continues here. He is still under supervision, and last time he burned 2 sites, 4 cars. He burned 2 cars in a deep garage, and people are worrying that he soon will become old enough to be punished, and people don't want him to go to prison. No. The town was ready to spend 500,000 euros to invest in Hassan until he was grown up. He should live in a special family in Marseille in southern France. He didn't want anymore. This is a story that shows us with who the state on the one hand deals and who is not supported by the state. This is like the citizens or the inhabitants, and where the state lets every criminal do what he wants. Yeah, it's like a tolerance. The tolerance is like bearing too much already. And some might now say, "Oh, it's against foreigners." No, it is not. Absolutely not. It's just what is, and what is, you can just have to take it. In a time where it's not allowed anymore to call things by the name, we experience the extreme form of being unfree. You have to be able to call things by their name without being in fear to filter them after political correctness. What's true should be able to be named as true. I also address this in my show as obvious. Because if you show as foreigners headlines in London town Rotherham, you don't know, it cannot be a great big town, but 1,500 or 2,000 girls had been raped by certain clients, I would say, and the authorities didn't pursue it because they had fear that they would be seen as racist, because they came at a certain background. The people who did it. And if we cannot protect our own girls, if we have fear of being accused to be racist, there has to be something wrong. This is to be some kind of insanity. So it's for me important to not out of, we don't act this way out of fear for being kept hostile, but in reality, because we want such circumstances, that what we experience here, and as this structures, is friction, is conflict, is criminality, is 100% wanted in this way, and not from the idea that they demand tolerance from us, yeah, in the way, and kept in absurd structures. But here, you can, if you get such criticism, not in many pieces, but not in all, but in many pieces, you can see that if you look around, you know quickly what is right and what's not right. It is totally independent of the body color or other ethnic groups. It's important that you know that with evil intention, people are being deprived of their home. Yeah. They are totally abused, those groups. For the one hand, they who are brought into a different culture without supporting them or getting them help, or if they don't want it in any way. Here, being made the prerequisites to get friction within the group. And the abuse of children, we shown often the highest circles practice it, and this town Rotherham, there were customers who went into police and government, and they wanted it and admitted it, and it should be made popular, because children in kindergarten should get playful sexual behaviors. And 50 Shades of Grey is they say like it's a sign of love if you whip each other, and those are examples that there are people who want to bring us to that it gets normal that we abuse children without it's the programming that's now is presented for the next generation. So here's the next generation pre-programmed, and this pre-programming is done because they want to make derivatives possible that are needed then. So they create the population is needed then. It starts in the kindergartens, no question. I wanted to add to the subject we just spoke about. We all have a space in this world where we are right and where we can fill in our own place. And this is taken away from us. It starts early. Nevertheless, if you are planted somewhere within the land or to another place, but our roots, we are not connected anymore to our roots. And this applies to many people in the whole world, and they are more easy to manipulate and easy to be driven, and don't solidarize in a way they don't want it, because people would get uncomfortable then. And we can easily see it then that other groups solidarize much stronger than we do, and by this have visible great big power in our system right now. Yeah, we can think about it. Maybe things change about that. So I have a news here. They sent it to me that's a little bit seems to be naive. Here it's from Fulda newspaper again. And the headline is EU Defense Seals for Specialties. So here's about TTIP, Free Trade Agreement, so-called. EU wants to maintain seals for regional goods. We want that the Black Forest ham should be called Black Forest ham still. We will not agree on protection for certain names, regional names, not anymore. And they want that genetic food should be only by smartphone, by barcode declared genetic modified food. The writer says, oh, thank you. Strange tones in the mainstream, not all can be covered. So I want to put a little salt on the wound and say that what's has been done here is nothing else but to give in at an not dangerous point. So people see, this is addressed in the mainstream media, but what's addressed in the mainstream media? You can still see call Schwarzwälder ham, Black Forest ham, Black Forest ham. It's very important, but it's a very, very little aspect in this agreement where special courts are above the national courts. So national is in apostrophes. At the same time, the environment protectors warn that genetics food is only declared by barcode. This means, on the other side, yes, of course, we will introduce genetic food. Yeah, smartphone you can have, but we can want the people to read it. So this is in reality no positive news, but a news where they say how far things are, and that we only discuss about the color and that is signed the treaty. And if we do it in green, then it's all right, isn't it?
Genau. So ist das. Schau her, Joe, das ist
Saxonian newspaper studies. More than 60% doubt democracy in Germany. Whatever this is kind of a study, 60% believe that in Germany there's no real democracy. So I believe there's here absolute real democracy. 100%. What we experience here is democracy, and this is what we experience here, and this is why democracy has to be exported in the whole world. Yeah, USA bring democracy into the world, and what we thought up, that what we think democracy happens, is not right, but what we find, this is democracy. And he has said that the influence of the if the elector would have to say anything, the elector just have to say, yes, I give you the or I think my rights in the election and box. I think my rights in the box as I elect. Here it's obvious how little you can know and still have the feeling that it's not a democracy. So here it's we wake up in different phases until we all are awake. Ecuador. Conrad Adenauer Foundation, after political influences goes away. The Conrad Adenauer political foundation in Germany leaves Ecuador. The Foreign Minister Ricardo Patino states something about that. He says they close their office and they would have taken political great influence. Here's a typical principle. We remember Putin in those times. He did a research on the so-called non-government organizations. The Democrats screamed, and here you see the Konrad Adenauer Foundation leaves, and Konrad Adenauer, the old chancellor, is exactly the representative of what should have happened here, yeah, and this fits like the fist on the eye. And we realize the people in Ecuador don't let them be blinded by some informations that they have given them as explanations what they plan for great things, for the exchange between Ecuador and Germany, how great that it should be, and look what's here happens in the truth. Also a sign of the quality of the time. Economic hitmen, they call those people who are, like we heard in Russia, want to take care of that companies are closing. Yeah, the arms are often, the tentacles are found in those organizations. From Pravda TV. I'm at the end of my headlines. I can go to the headlines, to the news that I carried around together from the whole world. Yeah, I've got also one. You see whenever you want. Here's one that's current from the 1st March of 2015. NASA should have given wrong data for global warming, says the Focus. New conspiracy theorists say, he says, NASA should have had wrong data for climate change. Well, there seem to be differences between measured and public data, and you have to read between the lines. So here they say it looks like, they say according to new conspiracy theories, and this term is used like a weapon. By what you watch is made into a theory. So I don't like to use this term, but we have to use that they put this label onto us, And I'd like to say conspiracy watcher, not a theorist. I watch proven conspiracies, and here NASA should have published wrong climate dates. They're different from the originally measured data. Experts explain how it came to this data. Here we have the experts again. You always see the expert without seeing him. Yeah, experts. We should invite an expert here. It's a nameless expert who stands for total group. And this can, maybe this secret agency, this can be the government or circles of scientists, this can be those who are climate specialists, those experts. And here comes the explanation. After in the year 2009, the computers of the climate research of University of East Anglia had been hacked and documents been stolen. There was conspiracy theorists had great climate gate, they thought. Yeah, climate change would have been invented and the researchers would have manipulated them. Is it a lie? Here, after they stated that 2014 had been the hottest year since the beginning of the regular temperature records, 1881 or 1981, it's a new scandal. So it's about further conspiracies, and the NASA Institute for Space will have published contradictory data, and the data they have published, they would differ. Why? It's no reason for conspiracy theory, because climate theory has not real good data. It's about that the people in the past didn't think that their results would be so important for climate change research. So there are many data, and it's not been all made so well, and the experts have climate change happens, and there's no reason for conspiracy theorists. So we can further sell and buy our CO2. Yeah. The story that is so ill and so absurd, the self-proving absurdity. In 2014 was the hottest year. I mean, it's different. It's cold weather. It's sometimes warmer, sometimes colder. Yeah? It has nothing to do with the climate change. And not that we humans are responsible for that. They want to sell this to us, and everywhere when I hear it, the experts say yes, and this has so much CO2. And should we forbid Coca-Cola? We spoke about this carbon. CO2 is very little in the air. Yeah, it's the one important aspect you have to say, and the other one is that we in our systems of permanent growth always need values to for this monetary system to the outside to be able to explain it in our in this model. We have to, if it are bundled credit contracts that are made as a product that is leveraged anymore, or the CO2, and we see exhaust gases that are normally worthless, then we can reclaim it for the worth chain. We have to give them a meaning, and it's based on their so-called problematics for the climate change. And I remember they forbid the greenhouse spray cans in the 80s, where the spray cans had been forbidden. They would enlarge our ozone hole. And at this time point, the patent was ended, and everyone could have used it, and then they forbid it. Yeah. So we here see the same structures, and we see it's always more embarrassing and always more primitive methods where they have to justify it. It's nothing else. But if you just would want to reduce CO2, you told me about Tesla S, the car, the electric car. and it's enormous much power, 400 PS or whatever. Yeah, let's speak about it. If you wanted it, you could promote that. Yeah, that's a very interesting subject with many levels of meaning. I've been in Hamburg last days, seen a car that has been presented in the gallery, and this was this Tesla S. They refer to Tesla, who had been a genius inventor, scalar waves, and like electricity, cordless electricity. Company Tesla uses this name to produce dynamic electro cars. First was Tesla Roadster, who was accelerating like a Ferrari or Lamborghini, was the car of the stars and the rich. I myself didn't deal that much with the subject, was now surprised to see this car now in a finished, totally new form. This Tesla S looks a little bit like a Jaguar, a modern, chic car, nice car. And you see under Tesla.com many special aspects. I've seen a great screen on this car. Normally the climatization is so big, a 17-inch screen that's been built in there, and you can steer many things in this. It's like science fiction. It's a very complex subject. I have to slowly address it. It's deserved it, because it can sharpen our view nicely. It's incredible. And there are other interesting details. This is car, as far as I know today, in different forms. It's an oil wheel, it's rear motor, and the price is between 70,000 till 120,000 euros. What you said, the 400 PS, this is the small version. This accelerates from 0 to 100 in 5 seconds. So I have a value like a top sports car, like a Porsche of the better kind. And this, with a true electro car, seems to be incredible. But it gets much, much more extreme. Not only the top of 200 kilometers per hour, also the reach. The car is in the strongest version with 700 PS, and this variety is with under 4 seconds from 0 to 100, and it's very not very many cars that are to be found in this league. And for an electro car, this doesn't fit in our kind of perception or imagination. And at the same time, a top speed of 250 kilometers per hour. A reach is at 400 kilometers. And they say it's longer, but how it depends on the heating, it reduces capacity and whatever. But now it gets really interesting. If you imagine how that you drive a car without a combustion engine, without oil, only a braking system that remembers that's like normal cars, and you open in front and the back and see the so familiar things in the car totally organized differently. Then we begin to perceive this is a strong change. Now, very interesting part comes. That's electro cars since 100 years, and this is successful. I said it on the telephone. If I tell someone of old electro cars, then I say, if you Dagobert Duck, have read it as a child, you certainly know the car of Grandmother Duck, who had a real old-timer in her farm. was an electro car. This is the first electro car of its time with this shape, and this car could drive forward, backward, and same speed. The argumentation is you don't get dirty, you don't have to handle with oil and poisonous things, and the lady of the world gets in a car, puts a lever into the front, and this car still astonishes everyone who drives with it. So it's described. Now there are big differences to this Tesla car, and here's one clue. Maybe it'll be a revolution for the repair stores. So it's interesting if you see the energy supply. This is the first question, where you can load it. Has it a replacement motor? It goes only with electricity. You can load it up at home at a normal power line, but it's 30 hours until you're fully loaded. No real option, but there's the possibility. If you order your Tesla, you can order it at Amazon in the internet, that you at the same time get a special power cord with a bigger power. It's in 4 hours you can load it. So if you drive small ways, you can load up each morning and drive each morning with a freshly loaded car. The costs are maybe a third referred to petrol. So electricity is very expensive in Germany in comparison to international other countries. In USA it's cheaper, but you still save 2/3 against oil and petrol. But here it's really interesting. So there are stations where you can load this car, so many that you can drive from Hamburg to Munich, also from east to west. And those stations will always help you that you can load up your car in between. You can say maybe turbo speed. In 20 minutes you can load it half full, because if you're in half distance, you can load it up cost-free. You can load it cost-free on those stations, and without gas, without cost for electricity, with 250 top speed, with values of a super sports car, and this in a time that we don't perceive that this happens in front of our own nose. And this is the interesting thing. What does this mean for us in the future? And I know that electricity is generated by power plants that are not so uncritical, that electricity is strongly it's our perception, our revolutions in front of our eyes, and had been suppressed until now. But the electro cars from General Motors, for example, they had all been crashed again. You could not. They destroyed them again in the 90s. You could not buy them, only lease them. Many people were sad because it worked well and had a good reach and there were no problems, but it wasn't wanted, and we see there's a strong oil lobby. But if you, after those climate, make panics for CO2, after those climate news, there would be the sense of politics, well, we promote those cars which have no old oil now, and it's even more exciting. One of the most fascinating statements of these companies is they say, our company gets better, our car gets better every week. And the update where they manage the car to produce it better. And this update comes via the internet, and at the same time for all Tesla S drivers, lifelong, free, and you have a high-speed internet connection that as long as you drive this car, it's free for you, cost-free for you. Of course you can be super veiled, more elegant than before, surveyed. It's not about discussion, it's bad, it's good, but it's about our training of our perception. And for this we need another important aspect we have also to watch. Who is behind Tesla? And the man who stands behind Tesla is one of the big fathers of PayPal. You could say, well, PayPal, all lights go on me because they are really to be regarded critically. But we see it's a man of the new economy, a man of a new business environment, who, with an idea, at once had come to a great succeeded, and he sold PayPal to eBay for 1.5 billion and now forwarded Tesla very strongly. This car, we have to say, has some specialties, and Mercedes meanwhile has bought 5%. Japanese, maybe Toyota bought 5% in these Tesla stations, where you can fully load the car within 40 minutes, can only be used by Tesla. The other systems we see now, we can see at the moment, they longly don't have this capacity, only a fragment of this volume and see aspect. This is an aspect which came into this branch from nowhere. I'm sure that the CEOs of Mercedes, BMW have not heard anything of this man years ago, and at once someone comes and builds a series of stations in whole Europe until Finland, where you can charge your car up for free, a car that doesn't have to hide for absolute luxury cars and highest quality manufactured, and has so many specialties that you can be only amazed. So we see someone from another industry that in such a complex and lobbyist industry, because the car branch is industry. There are patents vanishing. It's such a new idea. Yeah. So strong. It's incredible. Look at the videos on YouTube. Tesla S, look how the car's going. It's fascinating. Here we experience really a great step in a branch of which we thought it's so fixed, and someone comes with creative possibilities. Very interesting. Little excurse had been very, very long from climate change and CO2. Only we see that there are other solutions, and yeah, it's very interesting. Let's proceed, because we are very late. I have some news we can talk about quickly. This we had. NTV software should predict crimes. Police makes Cologne research laboratory. Predictive policies tells police where crimes will happen. Yeah, they test it. It's incredible. There's a film, Minority Report, where they, before murder has happened, the one should be arrested, and then policeman realize he's persecuted himself. So brave new world. Now here in Cologne, it's really tried out. So in Cologne, they make such a test, and here it says not so harmless as it happens. So you're really criticizing this. With this, they express, well, we watch that, it won't happen. In Sweden, the Ornithological Society has made a consequent step in the fight against racism. 10 birds, they renamed birds because they had a name. They sounded racist, the gypsy bird or whatever, or the Negro fink or whatever. And here we see on which parts we see how important it is to fight racism, and that they explain us what racism is. And the word gypsy is very, it's a rotational European, you say. Good to know. I have brought a news that's symbolical and its affects my old home. The Schierstein Bridge that connects Wiesbaden and Mainz, it's closed. There's a part has been fallen out of it. The bridge has been closed. This bridge is like in a prophetic it was judged as maybe not being able to be driven on anymore. And then they say 2050 maybe they cannot drive on this bridge. Now they summarize that they tell the federal, according to the federal traffic ministry, 6,000 of 39,000 bridges are not solid anymore. Experts, there we have them again, say it might be a greatly higher number. So we can see the bridges that have a symbolic quality in them. On the euro bills we see bridges, and the bridges that collapse say how it is with the connection and the structures. And in Wiesbaden and Mainz it's not comfortable, yeah, they have to 100,000 cars drive about that, and the Mainzer and Wiesbadener, they have a disturbed relationship, please see. Maybe it's good if they don't come anymore in the two rivaling cities, but they cannot drive above this bridge anymore, and we see how fast within hours a connection doesn't work anymore, and this is not to be improved by virtual bridges, whatever. The ferries can be used. And here's a headline, a news from the world of the children, from the world, Welt. Kermit, the frog, visits Obama and Michelle Obama in the White House. Children's world. Don't have to add much. My last news. Yeah, one short news. We could say much about that, but the freedom of opinion in Germany, a lawyer was sued for 1.5 years prison for delivering a speech at a conference, anti-censure conference, an anti-censorship conference in Switzerland. Had an opinion and talked, and now she's freedom of opinion doesn't know that you have to share every opinion you find good, but it means the freedom to address opinions, or you would have to be able to talk about certain opinions. And you always look to Russia and say there's no freedom there. Yeah, we have no freedom of opinion here, and you don't have to go to the protected areas by law, but there's a strong the political correctness. We see it clearly. It's a farce to speak of political correctness, because either something is true and correct or not. So it cannot be only politically true, because this would mean in the translation it would be wrong. Here I've got a last news that brings us from the illusionary equality to the real energies of 2nd of March today. Does the infra sound of wind power installations make sick? So in Denmark they barely build new wind energy mills, and dramatic. So animals screamed at the first test. They screamed and bited and in the cages, said Kais. Karlsbank Olsen,
seine Tierärztin im Morgen bei der Polizei
yeah,
Gemeinde Henning anrief, die
who
neuen Kraftwagen hinter dem Bauernhof abschalten zu lassen.
bred animals in the farm, and animals died
Mehr als 100 hatten sich
because they fought each other after installation of a wind
das hier ist keine Ausnahme,
mill
ganz
for power.
Anlagen,
They say
denen man eben weiß,
there are many
dass sie im Zusammenspiel mit Tieren zu solchen
things that lead in connection with animals to such behavior. And in Denmark, they speak about the Denmark that a big part of the electrical power in Denmark is from wind energy, and that this problem now seems to arise. And I've spoken about the subject in the past sometimes. Many people think that wind energy would be a clean energy, and in many parts we see it's not, as well as the rare earths that are needed to build wind power machines. They leave horrifying environmental damages, and on the other side we see its effectiveness and the long-lastingness of those, and the demontation are big problems. And the energetical world in all aspects, it's only one aspect is a big point. This wind power, it's my clear, when I'm convinced they serve a distortion of frequencies that keeps us in certain structures that let us be unstable to bring to this point. This is a point that's in great transition to the energetical thematics we have to do with, if they be artificial or right now ripe in time, and they encounter us. And this is our final subject. How do you feel with those news? Maybe just watch it. Just make yourself conscious what we are. We are life. We are consciousness. What's now? The body is not what I really am. It's just don't let yourself be pulled down by this so much. This is the intention maybe sometimes of the mass media, to keep us low in frequency, to manipulate us, to control us. But if you question it and see, well, I can watch it, and it's not my personal problem, but let's watch us as the collapsing of an illusion, and we're not so easy to control anymore. What you say is very basically all these forms we're confronted with now. I say forms, with forms or shapes that show, because it's basically the right kind to deal with that. It's maybe difficult to deal with that. We are drawn into certain things that run. We are permanently drawn into processes that you get wrapped in them. And our wish for silence and quietness, or being left in peace, it's not easily to be realized. There are hands and tentacles, like you are impressed, pulling at us. We are drawn into things. But many things that happen now in a phase where this gets conscious to us, where we realize it, where it doesn't just not happen by itself, but by our consciousness we start questioning things, get more critical, and to in some parts defend ourselves or reject things. And we can reject artificial structures that are human-made, that are in the illusionary level. They serve to keep us in artificial structures, to demand you things, to say to you who you have to be, how you have to be. Important is that you get clean yourself, that you get how you are an expression of the divine. It's not correct because you are the divine, but you perceive yourself as an expression of the divine. And the divine doesn't create anything that is wrong. The divine only creates what's perfect, what's in its perfection is drawing from our sides, because we always see fragments. We don't see all, we see only parts, and the parts are always not perfect. But you see what's perfect and complete in its divine order, perfect, but you experience yourself in a time of unorder. And there the divine aspects have to find their place. You have to accept yourself, get clean with yourself, accept yourself, and realize you're the part of the divine that cannot be brought into the world by someone else. You are the thing that is uniquely needed here, and you are clean and not manipulatable anymore. In the process of challenges of being have to be motivated and to be devoted. Again, these are the phases, Monsieur again. But you are not touched in your own true quality by this. This is eternal and unbreakable. So there is to be done nothing and just to do what's happened, if you like what you like. If you don't want to do anything, because you can, and you do this. Also not doing is doing. It happens through you, but don't let them force you into some things, or imagine you, or the imagination, I would have to save the world if I see this. So many people think, well, you have to do things. You cannot alone save the world, but it changes in the way, extent, and we don't have to. Doesn't have to be stopped. I want to say quickly, it doesn't have to be saved. Yeah, it is right as it is. It's a momentum record, and where a new order just arises, and the one part has to go upward. Yeah, to a drainage. We think it could be different, would, but it doesn't. It happens as it happens. And I say always, be conscious to the aspects that are unconscious now. This means you can do it by putting a part of your attention to those areas that are normally not regarded by you. So if you just say, I regard just exactly how I walk, every step, all that I do, and then everyone who watches it or understands it as a concept would say, you don't really change things. But yes, you change your own way of regarding yourself. This changes all. By this way of perception, of watching, everything else will be perceived differently and gets another importance. Your thoughts in the head in this moment get a little bit less important, other things get more important. By this you can realize that in you the other aspects also will have great space, even if the reason screams the loudest and pretends to be the most important ones, but it's only a little aspect in you. To put this in the real right relationship, this happens through what we call meditation. I find an interesting thought that comes to me. The intelligent cells, also the cells in our body have a consciousness, and many people say it has no physical symptoms, but we, with our body, with our cells, can talk to them. The vibration, we can let the vibration in our cells can let it go up and let the vibration go down. Depends on where we put our focus on. It's a note to that we can watch our physical feelings, not to be put in fear, but let the vibration go up. Whether combination of cells to a bigger one thing is great. It's to be found in the whole world. We are part of something greater, bigger, and can find those structures in small and big structures. And this leads us to a deeper peace if we realize that we are an important part of the whole. And if you would be in the cell combination only take out one cell, then it could be must be equaled out by the combined cells. And we see that biggest cell combinations experience bigger abilities and bigger possibilities of performance. So we see complex structures have more ways of qualities. We see that this bigger cell combination needs another energetic supply. It needs bigger supply, but has more ways. Energy has to flow. In the moment we have a stopped energy flow at many pieces. We see it in us, we see it in the world, that the energy flows are kidnapped or misused. The energies float as they must, and everything sometimes will follow again the natural order. And the energies from the sources are always there, and we stop them partially and didn't know it. Maybe as a conclusion, a word, it's all alright. We can admit it and trust in the divine of which we are part and of which we are an expression, and don't have to make ourselves so much sorrow over these things. I would add another sentence to this, which brings it great to the point. The awakening happens. It's inevitable. If you're asleep, you will fall asleep, you will wake up. This is the process in which we are. And for this, we will have to feel a little bit uncomfortable in the bed. That's the one who dreams bad. Only this one will want to awake during the sleep. And this bad signals we get that the wonderful awakening can happen. This is, you cannot prevent it.